It is just past 6 in the morning, and my husband is still asleep. I am making miso soup the way my mother made it, the way her mother made it, the way her mother made it before her. Outside, the cicadas have already started. Later this morning, I will walk to see my neighbor, Etsuko. She is 94. Yesterday, she remembered the name of a teacher she had when she was 7 years old, and she could not remember if she had already watered her tomatoes. Both of these things are normal for her. Neither one frightens her. I have buried 3 of my closest childhood friends. 2 of them kept their minds clear until the very end. One did not. Same village, same generation, same war, the same hunger years, more or less than hunger years. And yet one of them, in her last years, no longer knew my name. I used to think that was simply the wheel of fortune turning, nothing to be understood, only accepted. I don't think that anymore. And what changed my mind wasn't a doctor. It was a group of scientists who spent decades quietly counting things most of us never think to count. How often people in this village spoke to a neighbor. How full their plates were left at the end of a meal. How many mornings a week someone had a reason to leave the house. Okinawa has more people who reach 100 years old with their minds still intact than almost anywhere else on Earth. Researchers have been asking why for close to 50 years now. And a good part of the answer, it turns out, was never a secret at all. It was simply never written down because nobody here thought of it as anything other than an ordinary Tuesday. I am not a doctor. I want to say that clearly before I go any further. But I have lived 92 years watching this question play out in real people, real kitchens, and real people. So let me ask you what I have asked myself for a long time now. What if the difference between my 2 friends was never really a mystery? What if it was simply something nobody had put into words yet? My name is Sachiko Uehara. I was born on this island in a small village near Ojimi in 1934. I still live in the house my husband and I built together 68 years ago. He is 95 now. We still argue about how much salt belongs in the soup. I did not grow up thinking about longevity. Nobody around me did. We simply lived a certain way because it was the only way we knew. It was only later, when researchers began coming to our villages with questionnaires and blood pressure cuffs, that I learned there was a name for what we were doing, and that people in other parts of the world were curious about it. Today, I want to talk about something that worries many families: memory. And the slow loss of it. Not because I have a cure. There isn't one. But because there are things my community has done for generations, almost without noticing that current research increasingly connects to a lower risk of decline. I think that is worth 15 minutes of your time. Most people I have spoken with, especially visitors from other countries, believe that memory loss in old age is mostly a matter of luck. Either your family has the gene or it doesn't. Either you will lose your mind or you won't. And there is very little to be done about it either way. That is not quite what the evidence shows. In 2024, a group of dementia researchers, the Lancet Commission, published an update to years of accumulated research. Their conclusion was that as much as 45% of dementia cases worldwide are linked to a set of 14 factors that can, at least in part, be influenced by how a person lives. I want to be careful here because I do not want to overstate this. 45% is not 100%. Genetics still matter. Some people do everything right and still decline. Some people, like my friend Etsuko, seem to do very little differently from anyone else and simply keep their clarity into their 90s. Nobody fully understands why. But nearly half is not nothing. And when I look at that list of 14 factors, things like social isolation, physical inactivity, poor diet, high blood pressure, hearing loss, and lack of mental engagement, I recognize almost all of them as things my village organized our entire daily life around without ever calling it prevention. Let me walk you through what that actually looked like. When I was 17 years old, 4 other girls from my village and I formed what we call a Moai. In our language, it simply means meaning for a shit. Long ago, Moai were formed so villagers could pool money. If one family needed help paying for land or recovering from a bad harvest, the group would lend what they could, and it would circle back around in time. The 5 of us kept ours going for our entire lives. We are down to 3 now. We still meet twice a week. We drink tea, sometimes something stronger. We complain about our husbands. We ask each other quite directly, "Are you eating? Are you sleeping? Did you go to the doctor about that thing you mentioned last month?" Nobody in a Moai disappears quietly. If one of us stops showing up, the others go to her house that same day. Researchers who have studied Okinawan communities for decades, including the Okinawa Centenarian Study, have pointed to these lifelong social groups as one of the more consistent threads behind healthy aging on these islands. Currently, social isolation appears on that same Lancet Commission list of 14 risk factors linked to dementia. That does not mean loneliness causes memory loss in any simple, direct way. The relationship is complicated. Researchers are still working out exactly how much of it is cause and how much is something else. Entirely, isolation and early cognitive decline can feed each other in both directions. But the association keeps showing up, study after study, in different countries and among different populations. And it is one of the few risk factors on that list that costs absolutely nothing to address. You do not need to call it a Moai. You do not need 5 people. You do not need a lifelong commitment. What matters, as far as anyone can tell, is regular, genuine contact with other people. Not a phone call, not a message, but sitting across from someone, being asked how you are, and being expected to answer honestly. Here is the part most people are surprised to hear. Of all 14 factors on that researcher's list, this may be the only one that costs nothing, requires no equipment, and can be started this afternoon. And it is very often the first one people let go of quietly without noticing. There is a word in Okinawan that does not translate cleanly into English. It means something close to the reason you get up in the morning. Not a job necessarily, not an achievement, just a reason. Until fairly recently, there was no real word for retirement in the traditional Okinawan way of speaking. My husband was a fisherman. He is 95 and was a fisherman. 3 mornings a week, weather allowing, he still goes down to the water, not to sell what he catches anymore, but because a morning without the boat feels unfinished to him. I have spent decades tending the same small vegetable garden. My knees complain about it these days. I keep doing it anyway, because on the mornings I skip it. Something in me feels restless in a way I do not enjoy. What is interesting to me is that when researchers ask why this might matter for the brain, the honest answer is that it is not fully settled science. There isn't one fully settled science, but several plausible threads point in the same direction. A sense of purpose tends to come packaged with lower chronic stress, and chronic stress is connected to several of those 14 modifiable risk factors: depression, high blood pressure, poor sleep. People with a strong sense of purpose also tend to stay more physically and socially active almost automatically, simply because they have somewhere to be and something to do. It is less a single ingredient than a habit that quietly pulls several good habits along with it. I am not telling you to find your one true calling. I think that idea puts far too much pressure on people, particularly on people who are already grieving a career, a spouse, or a body that does not move the way it used to. A reason to get up can be very small. Mine, some mornings, is simply the tomatoes. What surprised me when I first heard about the research is that nobody ever measures purpose in a blood test. There is no scan for it, and yet it keeps appearing again and again in the data of people who age well, which makes me wonder how much else we are failing to measure simply because it doesn't fit on a chart. Before we eat in this house, someone usually says, Hara Hachi Bu. It means, roughly, eat until you are 80% full. There is a simple physical reason behind it. It takes roughly 20 minutes for your stomach to signal your brain that it is full. If you eat quickly and finish everything in front of you well within that window, you have very likely eaten more than your body needed. The signal simply had not arrived yet. What we actually eat matters too. And here I want to be specific rather than vague. Traditionally, a large share of our daily calories came not from white rice, but from a purple-fleshed sweet potato we call beni. It is rich in a compound called anthocyanin, the same pigment that gives blueberries their color. By some measurements, our sweet potato contains even more of it than blueberries. Alongside that, we eat a great deal of bitter melon, seaweed, tofu, and very little processed meat. I want to be honest with you about something because I do not like overselling a vegetable. No single food prevents memory loss. There is no meal that acts as armor. What the research on diet and brain health generally shows, and this holds across several different long-term studies, not just here is that diets low in ultra-processed foods and high in vegetables and fish are associated with somewhat lower rates of cognitive decline over time, associated with, not proven to cause, not guaranteed to prevent. That is an honest sentence, even if it is a less exciting one. Diabetes and high blood pressure both sit on that Lancet Commission list of 14 risk factors. Diet plays an obvious role in both of those. So even without a magic ingredient, eating in a way that keeps your blood pressure and blood sugar steady over decades is doing real, measurable work, just not the dramatic kind. There is one more thing about Hara Hachi Bu that I did not mention yet. It is the part I find most interesting. It was never framed as a health rule at home. It was framed as manners, a way of respecting the food and respecting the person who cooked it. Nobody in my childhood was told it was good for their blood pressure. We simply were not taught to associate fullness with finishing the plate. I have come to think that may be exactly why it lasted so many generations, while so many modern diets do not. I do not exercise, if by that word you mean going somewhere specifically to move your body and then leaving. I have never done that in my life. But I water my garden by hand with a bucket several times a day. I walk to see Etsuko instead of asking someone to drive me. I hang my laundry outside, which means bending, reaching, lifting, and walking up and down stairs many times before breakfast. None of this looks like exercise. All of it adds up to a great deal of movement spread across the entire day, almost none of which I would describe as effortful. Physical inactivity is another one of the 14 factors researchers connect to dementia risk. And separately, movement supports the same blood pressure and circulation that protect the heart, which turns out to matter enormously for the brain as well, because the brain depends entirely on a steady, healthy blood supply. A body that moves throughout the day rather than sitting still for most of it and then exercising hard for 1 hour tends to keep that circulation working more consistently. I will also mention, because it is part of the same list, that I take a slow walk most evenings when the weather is cooler, not particularly for my heart, but because the evening air here is lovely, and because I like to see who else is out. I mention this because I know many of you have been told that real exercise means a gym, a class, a strict schedule. I want to gently push back on that idea. The research on movement and brain health does not ask how hard you worked. It mostly asks how often you moved it off, and that is a much easier bar to clear than most people assume. Every evening I write a little in a notebook: the weather, what we ate, how my husband, small complaints, small pleasures. I have done this for more than 30 years. My husband plays the sanshin most evenings. It is a traditional 3-stringed instrument he has played since he was a boy. Even now, he tells me he still has not fully mastered it. Hearing loss is on that same list of 14 risk factors. It is also one researchers have become much more confident about in recent years. Untreated hearing loss appears to place real strain on the brain over time, possibly because the brain has to work harder to fill in the missing sounds, leaving less capacity for other things. I bring this up because it is one of the more fixable items on the entire list, and one of the most commonly ignored if your hearing has quietly declined and you have simply adjusted around it. That is worth a real conversation with a doctor, not simply a habit to accept. Beyond that, ongoing mental engagement, reading, playing an instrument, learning something moderately difficult, or even keeping a journal appears to build what some researchers call cognitive reserve, an extra capacity that seems to help some people's brains continue functioning reasonably well even when underlying changes are present. It is not a guarantee, but it is another small, ordinary habit that keeps appearing in the research. Of everything on that list of 14 factors, hearing is the one I wish more people knew about. It rarely comes up during a routine checkup unless you mention it yourself, and by the time it becomes obvious to everyone else in the room. It has often been quietly costing the brain for far longer than anyone realized. I want to slow down here, because this is the part I care about most. None of what I have told you is a cure. None of it is a guarantee. I have watched people who ate carefully, stayed socially connected, worked in their gardens every morning, and still lost themselves to this disease. I have also known people who smoked, drank, rarely left their chairs, and kept a sharp mind until the day they died. Genetics matter. Chance matters. There is still a great deal we do not understand. What the research supports is something more modest, and I think more honest, that a meaningful share of dementia risk, not all of it, but a real portion is connected to things people can actually influence, in that the earlier in life those habits begin, the more they seem to matter. 14 factors, spread across an entire lifetime, adding up to something researchers estimate at close to 45%. If someone in your family already has memory loss, none of this is about blame. It was never fully within anyone's control to begin with. And if you are worried about your own memory, please see a doctor rather than simply trying to eat more purple sweet potatoes. Some causes of memory problems are treatable: thyroid disorders, certain medications, depression, vitamin deficiencies, even hearing loss itself. A real diagnosis matters more than anything I can tell you in a video. I have often wondered why more of this is not part of an ordinary doctor's visit. I do not think anyone is hiding it from us. I think the answer is much simpler than that. A great deal of medical research is focused on finding a drug, something precise, something that can be patented, something that can be prescribed during a 15-minute appointment. That kind of research matters enormously, and I am grateful for it. But advice like walk a little more, eat a little differently, call a friend twice a week, get your hearing checked, none of those things fit neatly into the same system. There is no product to sell, no single prescription to write, and the benefits often take years, sometimes decades, to become visible. They are simply harder to package than a pill. Even when the evidence behind them is strong, that is not a conspiracy. It is simply a gap, and I think it is worth knowing that the gap exists. So, if you have stayed with me this far, here is what I would suggest. Find one person, just one, someone you can commit to speaking with regularly, in person whenever possible, or by phone if distance makes that necessary. Have real conversations at least twice each week. Notice how full you feel while you are eating. Try putting your fork down a little before the plate is empty. Give your body a few minutes before deciding whether you truly need more. Add a few more vegetables to your meals, more beans, more fish if you enjoy it. Less processed food whenever it is practical, not as a rigid rule, just as a gentle direction. Move your body throughout the day. Walk when you can. Work in the garden. Carry groceries. Take the stairs. Stretch while doing ordinary things. Do not wait for the perfect exercise program before you begin moving. If it has been several years since anyone checked your hearing, make an appointment. That one surprises many people, but it may be one of the simplest opportunities to protect your brain over the years ahead. And finally, keep your mind busy. Read books. Write your thoughts. Learn a new recipe. Practice an instrument. Study a language. Do puzzles if you enjoy them. The activity itself matters less than continuing to ask your brain to do something it has not already mastered. None of these habits are dramatic. None of them promise certainty. None of them can guarantee that memory loss will never come. But together, over years and over decades, they seem to matter far more than most people realize. I am 92 years old. I do not know how many more years I have, and I have made peace with that. More than living a very long life, I hope to live a clear one for as long as that is possible. If someone you love is living with memory loss today, I am truly sorry. It is one of the hardest things a family can experience. Nothing I have shared today changes that reality, but perhaps it can help someone else begin protecting the years that are still ahead. If you would like, tell me where you are watching from and tell me whether any of these habits already exist in your own family, perhaps under different names, perhaps in different traditions. I always enjoy reading those stories. Next time, I would like to tell you about our vegetable gardens, how my grandmother knew exactly what to plant simply by watching the birds, the rain, and the changing seasons. Long before anyone called it companion planting, it is a much smaller story than today's, but I think it is one you will enjoy. Thank you for spending this morning with me. Take good care of yourself, and I hope we will meet again soon.